We're going to be looking at how to make a garden path with broken concrete for less than $100. So these are the little pieces of flagstone that I got for free and created some paths. But when I built my studio, there was a sidewalk existing where it was. And these are the pieces of that sidewalk. So now I'm working with what people on Pinterest and some Google searches call Urbanite or recycled concrete. Take some treated 1x4 concrete form boards and then just driven some stakes in the ground. And I set this path up to only 30 inches wide. You can already see how I'm starting to shape this up. And I do have a concrete chisel and of course goggles. I have a mallet, a rubber mallet, and a hammer. Of course, a measuring tape right here, a drill. But I measured out my width of my path, hammered in the stakes, and then drove some screws into them to create this border. I think I bought 10 bags of play sand, and I went ahead and started just laying in a slim coating of that play sand. Now I'm fitting the stones down in there, and when the stones don't come up level, I push a little more sand up underneath them so I can get kind of a nice level walking surface where you can see my shoe is hitting at the same spots. So another tool that's going to be essential is a broom, and I found a leaf blower to be really handy in this process as well, mainly because later it rained on me during the project and I had to really accelerate the process. So you see me here down on my knees playing a great big game of three-dimensional Tetris. To simplify this three-dimensional game of Tetris, I tried to choose blocks that were consistent in their height. Now, the bottoms of these are really inconsistent because they're more or less gravel on the bottom. But these are about 5 inches thick, most of what I picked up, between 5 and 4 inches thick. Towards the very end of my path, it's more shallow, so I used some stuff that was 2 to 3 inches thick. But it allowed for me to just focus on the shapes and fitting the puzzle pieces together. I really tried to focus on the big stuff first. Now this one's got a brick stuck to the bottom of it. So just taking a hammer to that and getting rid of it makes it usable now. I would focus on the bigger pieces of the puzzle and getting them in first. And I would also kind of try to keep my piles where I had straight edge pieces off to one side, triangle shapes off to another side, and then the round pieces off in another, not a pile, but just kind of laid out so I could see everything because I was constantly playing this puzzle game. Now you see me fitting these rocks into place, and sometimes I would chisel out the new rock that I was trying to put into place. Sometimes I would chisel out the existing pieces that were surrounding what I was going to put in. So a little bit of both happening here. Broke off a little bit more than I intended to, but that's okay. The piece still fit really well. So I continue to take these smaller pieces now and chisel out spots for them. Here's a really good example of a triangle spot that I needed to get, and I needed a clean line. So I put it in place and draw my line first using the chisel. I say draw, that's a very loose term here. This is not going to go easily, so eventually I have to set this on the ground off to the side and work on it. This one takes a little more patience. This chisel with a hand protector built in, this is the only kind I would recommend. Makes that nice clean cut, and I can now fit this triangular piece into place. A couple little taps with the rubber mallet, because again, I don't want to break what I've already created. It goes down too deep, and that's usually the outcome when you pound it in place. But just like done the whole time before, I'm packing sand from the surrounding areas down underneath the stone so that I can bring it up to level. Constantly having to work with that level because of the uneven surface below. And if you've ever worked with flagstone, as I have, you'll know that you've got to work with those uneven surfaces on the bottom of that too. Here we got a real detail. I may have gone a little overboard with some of the detail work here. Getting a really small plug of stone into place and tapping that in, and then getting it up to level, and consequently the surrounding block that I shook loose. I'm just sweeping off the rest of the sand from the surface of the concrete blocks to get it down in between. I want sand down in there, but not too much. I want to leave space for my filler. The sand is more or less just a base for leveling and creating a little distance in between. So I've got about 5 inches of depth on most of this. For the concrete blocks, what I'm trying to consider is I'm gonna have to dig out the sand later, at least make sure I've got a couple of inches to pour concrete down into. I've talked to concrete professionals who say you want a minimum of a 2-inch pour. Now I'm not actually gonna be pouring concrete, but I am gonna use concrete as my filler instead of mud. I want something a little more permanent that won't allow for weeds to come up through. This will allow for moss to grow through. So I really like that look. I wanted to remove more of the sand from in between the stones so that I have that space for the concrete or whatever filler you're going to use. If it's mud, whatever, you may do more organic approach to it. But I'm going to use this quick set concrete that you don't even have to mix. You just pour it down into these crevices and then wet it with a hose. Like I said, it does rain later during this video, so not as much hose needed, but getting everything in place, constantly working on that level. Now I'm going to take my bags of Quickcrete, just slice them open, dump them, and then work it into those crevices. I bought 6 bags of this Quickcrete fast set, no mix. And this is about a 25-foot by 30-inch wide pathway. And I only used 4 bags. And you can see I put the 4 bags only two-thirds of the way down. So I had to do a lot of extra sweeping. You can see how I'm just kind of pulling the concrete with the broom into the crevices. I don't have form boards at the beginning or the end of the path because it's kind of organic, and it's kind of the look I'm going for. And you can see there's pebbles in this mix, and that's fine. I don't want them on top of the surface, but it's fine to fill them down in between the blocks. And of course, if they escape and get a little further down in there, that's good too. So now I've got to finish the rest of the path with the sand, and I'm actually mixing some of the concrete powder in with it. If it fills down in between there, that's fine. And now I've just got to get some kind of even distribution down in between these last blocks. Constantly on the goal for leveling. I've got to go back, and this Prybar came in really handy. You could use a flathead screwdriver, probably. You might bend one. Chisel, anything with a flat, long shaft that you can get down in between the blocks, because you're not going to get your fingers down in there after you've filled it with concrete and sand. So getting this flat edge down in there and prying the blocks up so that I can get them to level with the, existing blocks. So basically what I'm running into is I've got some blocks that are 5 inches thick and some that are 4.5 inches thick. And so I've got to lift them up and shimmy the loose material, the sand and the concrete, down further underneath the blocks. So to build them up and elevate them to what is level. Here comes the rain. My whole deal is sloped. This whole pathway slopes down towards the back of the shed. And it also slopes off toward those plants in that garden bed. I had to get this concrete out fast because of the rain, so I used the blower. I want the surface of, that organic aged surface of the old sidewalk to show through. I don't want it covered. I by the new concrete. I'm not trying to make a new concrete look, obviously. Oh yeah, here's some bags of concrete sitting out, so got to get those away, and the blower. But I need to show that nice old rugged discolored by Georgia red clay and years and years of weathering. It's probably a 50-year-old sidewalk I busted up. And so that gold mine of just organic look is what I want to show through. So I'm rinsing off the top to make sure there's no concrete powder that's going to hide this nice organic surface. Still prying up a little bit for level here and there. And what I wanted to do to make sure that I get a drain off of the surface is to just dig out about a 1/4 inch down groove in between the stones. And that'll allow for the water to run off, and you won't get standing water on your walkway. Our 3-dimensional game of Tetris has finally paid off. As you can see, the path is complete, with the exception of we still have to remove the form boards, which is just a little hammer work. Make sure that when you put your stakes in the ground that you put them outside of the form boards, not inside. I kind of made that mistake, and I'll have to do a little fix on that. But anyway, as you can see, in all its glory, this garden path is near completion.